Let's now welcome author and political analyst John Matisonn. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Mr. Matisonn. It was a highly anticipated address in Congress. Trump's address before both houses of the United States Congress comes just a mere 6 weeks since he took office. I mean, a slew of executive orders and trade wars in the form of increased tariffs later. What were your key takeaways on both domestic and foreign policy issues?
Well, the big news on foreign policy was that he had got a letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine agreeing to come into the talks to sign and sort of paying homage to kissing the ring of President Trump, which Trump clearly expects. And so the Ukraine talks are back on again. So that's the big move, because as you heard on Friday, they went wildly off the rails. Domestically, he's still carrying on with many of these actions, which are probably illegal. And in fact, one of his actions went before the Supreme Court today and was ruled out of order. But he's got this policy of a shock doctrine. Keep doing so many things, even if they're questionable legally. By the time the courts catch up with you, it'll be too late.
I mean, exactly to that last point, Trump did say that his administration had accomplished more in 43 days than most administrations accomplish in 4 years or even 8 years. So what do you then make of that statement, just given the sweeping changes that he has introduced that many are worried about, that it could have devastating and even long-lasting consequences?
Yes, well, you know, he's deliberately pushing over the legal line. For instance, all the work that Elon Musk is doing, firing people and closing down departments, most of that is probably illegal. But the point he's banking on is that by the time any courts can try to rectify it, the people will be gone. And therefore, you'll have to rebuild whatever you can rebuild from scratch. So the damage is enormous, but it's still, the dust hasn't settled yet. We still have no real idea how this is going to end up.
I want to just touch on just some of those, foreign policy issues that he mentioned, or even those engagements. I mean, on the war between Ukraine and Russia, although Trump didn't, spend a long time on Ukraine, it does seem there's a change in his shift, from ordering a pause on military aid to Ukraine just a mere, days before that address, following that shocking Oval Office argument with President Zelensky over the weekend, to seemingly being pleased when mentioning that both Kiev and Moscow were ready to negotiate peace. What are we likely to see on that front specifically?
Well, look, President Trump has been the bully. They say, where does the 500-pound gorilla sit? Wherever the 500-pound gorilla wants to. And that's what Trump is doing. He knows he's the most powerful country on earth, and he's demanded that Zelensky pay homage to him. And Zelensky had no choice, because he'd cut off the military support that Zelensky has to have to keep the war going. So Zelensky ate humble pie. He kissed the ring of President Trump, and now the talks are back on.
I want to bring it closer to home now, just given the devastation that the cutting of UN aids has posed. What do you make of his, celebration around money cuts from aid programs, especially in the African continent, even remarking that he has never heard of a country called Lesotho?
Look, it's, in American politics, this is the easy thing. The aid, all of US aid throughout the world is less than 1% of its budget. So it's not significant. Cutting it won't change the budget of the United States significantly, but it's something that a lot of domestic American public will like. And so he's played to the gallery. The many American voters say, Why aren't you helping us? Well, instead, you're helping all these foreigners. It makes for good television, and it does his bidding. But many countries in the world will suffer.
Let's touch a little bit before I let you go, just on Europe's position now in this Ukraine-Russia war, because we've seen support from France, we've seen support from Britain in as far as providing aid to Ukraine is possible. But what are those relations like with the U.S. administration?
Well, the rift between Europe and America is the biggest rift there's been in 80 years, since World War II. No American administration has turned on its allies the way that this one has done. And you know, also he's set these tariffs on his other allies, Canada, who's been a lifelong ally of America in every war it's ever fought, and Mexico. So the Europe and other allies are in shock. And what they're going to do, Europe is now forced to rearm. Now, some Americans will say that's a good thing. They were freeloading on American military all these years. But the fact is now that Europe has had the shock of its life, and it's got to think about how it's going to go going forward, knowing that it just can't rely on America in the way that it has for 80 years.
And I mean, going forward, following that shock that they are currently in, or the state of shock, I would imagine they would have to start working hard on those diplomatic relationships.
Well, yes, you know, they played it, both President Macron of France and the British Prime Minister, when they saw him last week. They played their hands very carefully. They flattered him and so on, because they know that's what you need to do. But the reality is they know they cannot. The result of what he's done in the last 6 weeks has led them to the conclusion that they can't trust him, that he might help them be an ally, whether a contract or a treaty is signed or not. He may help them if he wants to, but he may not. And that's why there is now already a push from Europe to spend nearly €1 trillion to rearm all the states of Europe.
All right, John, thank you so much for your analysis. Really do appreciate it. That is political analyst and author John Matisonn.